I never imagined I'd find myself in such an emotionally complicated place. When I married David, I embraced his son Ryan with open arms. He was only 12 when we met, and after David passed suddenly 5 years ago, it was just the two of us. Ryan was no longer a boy. Now at 21 he was a man, respectful, thoughtful, and incredibly grounded. We had leaned on each other through the grief, our shared pain quietly drawing us closer in ways neither of us truly acknowledged at the time. This trip to the beach wasn't anything special on the surface. We had done it every year since David's passing. It was our tradition, our way of remembering him without letting the grief swallow us whole. The sound of the waves, the salt in the air, the soft sand under our feet, all of it reminded us that life moved on whether we wanted it to or not. I didn't expect anything to feel different this time, but it did. There was something in the way Ryan looked at me when we first arrived. Not intense. Longer. Lingering. Like he saw me in a way he hadn't before. Or maybe I just noticed it for the first time. We settled into our usual rhythm. Morning walks, light conversations, lazy afternoons reading by the water. He'd grown into such a kind man. I noticed things I'd never let myself see. How he always checked to make sure I had everything I needed, how he listened when I spoke like every word mattered. He wasn't trying to impress me. He was just being himself. And somehow that made it all the more difficult to ignore this slow, confusing flutter in my chest. One afternoon as we walked along the edge of the surf, he brushed a piece of seaweed from my shoulder. It was such a small gesture, but my body froze for a moment longer than it should have. There was nothing inappropriate in his touch. It was gentle, respectful, but something had shifted. I felt it. And judging by the way he looked at me after, so did he. Back at the beach house, I sat on the porch watching the sun melt into the ocean. Ryan came out quietly and sat beside me. We didn't say anything at first. Just silence, warm and heavy. Then he spoke, barely above a whisper. "You've always been there for me. I don't think I would have made it without you." I smiled, trying to keep the mood light. "We got through it together." He nodded. "But it's more than that. You're the only person who really sees me. And I don't know when it changed, but I look at you differently now." My heart stumbled. The wind carried his words away before I could decide how to respond. Part of me wanted to shut it down immediately. The other part, a part one didn't know existed until that moment, felt seen too. We just sat there quietly holding that space. No declarations. No answers. Just the truth hanging softly between us. The next day everything felt a little heavier. Not awkward, just more aware. I couldn't stop thinking about what Ryan had said. He hadn't crossed a line, but he had opened a door, and now I was standing in the threshold, unsure whether to walk through or close it quietly behind me. We went about the day like usual, but our words were careful, measured. Still, the silence between us felt louder than ever. That afternoon, as we walked by the water again, Ryan brought up our conversation from the night before. He wasn't pushy. Just honest. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable," he said. "I just needed you to know." I told him I appreciated his honesty, that I was still processing. He nodded, understanding more than I gave him credit for. Then he said something that stopped me. "I think I've been holding it in for a long time. I just didn't want to ruin what we had." He looked out at the horizon, not waiting for me to respond. I felt my chest tighten. There was nothing reckless in his words. No immaturity. Just a quiet truth that carried weight. We sat on the sand, not touching, just side by side. He spoke again, softer this time. "You were there when everything fell apart. You didn't have to love me, but you did. That kind of love stays with you." I looked at him and for the first time really let myself see him. Not as the boy I helped raise, but as the man he had become. He wasn't asking for anything. He just wanted me to know his heart. He reached out slowly, his hand brushing against mine. Not grabbing, just touching. It was the most innocent gesture, but it sent a jolt through me. I didn't pull away. I couldn't. It wasn't about lust. It wasn't forbidden. It was a connection that had grown quietly over years of loss, healing, and understanding. I didn't speak. I let the moment pass naturally, aware of its weight. Later that evening, as we cleaned up after dinner, he looked at me with that same calm presence and said, "I don't expect anything from you. I just needed to be real with you." That meant more to me than any grand declaration. He wasn't trying to change our relationship overnight. He wasn't demanding anything. He simply gave me a piece of himself. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my heart and mind at war. This wasn't something I planned, nor something I had even considered a year ago. But something about Ryan's openness, his gentleness, made me question everything I thought I knew about love and boundaries. I didn't have the answers, but I knew one thing. The way he made me feel wasn't wrong. It was real. And that terrified me more than anything. I woke up feeling like the air around me had changed. It wasn't just about what Ryan said or did. It was about what I had felt in response. I kept asking myself if it was confusion, loneliness, or something deeper I hadn't allowed myself to admit. We had always been close, but the emotional connection now felt layered, like something fragile was trying to grow beneath the surface. I needed clarity, not just for me but for both of us. That morning I made coffee for us like I always did, but this time I asked him to sit with me. He did without hesitation, his eyes calm, open. I didn't dance around the issue. I told him I needed to understand if what he felt was about love, or if it was just a side effect of the years we spent leaning on each other, trying to survive pain. He listened, really listened, then took a breath and said, "I've thought about that too. I know it's not just comfort. I've had relationships. I've met other people. But no one has ever made me feel grounded like you do." There was no hesitation in his voice, no attempt to romanticize anything. He wasn't lost. He was clear. That clarity made it even harder. I told him that while I couldn't deny the bond between us, we had to be careful. We had to think beyond the feelings. There was a history here, and though we weren't blood, we were still family in the eyes of the world. That carried weight. I didn't want to lead him into something that might damage him or me. He nodded slowly and then said something that stayed with me. "You've always put everyone else first. Maybe it's time you ask yourself what you really want, not what you're supposed to want." I wasn't expecting that. It struck deeper than anything else. Because he was right. I'd built my life around responsibility and survival, not desire or possibility. I had shut down parts of myself so long ago I barely remembered what they felt like. And now, with one honest conversation, they were all waking up at once. I told him I needed time. Not to figure out how I felt, but to decide if it was something I could live with, something I could accept about myself. He agreed. No pressure. No expectations. Just space. And for the first time, I felt that he wasn't just my late husband's son anymore. He was someone who saw me completely and cared enough to wait. We spent the rest of the day apart, not out of avoidance but respect. I journaled, thought, cried a little without knowing exactly why. This wasn't a forbidden romance. It was two people who had grown together through pain, now trying to understand if love had quietly taken root. And if it had, what it meant to water it or let it go. In the days that followed, something between us shifted. We didn't talk about that conversation again, but everything we did was touched by a new awareness. He wasn't pushing. He wasn't distant either. It was like we both silently agreed to respect the boundary we'd set while acknowledging that something meaningful had been said and couldn't be taken back. I noticed how he gave me space but remained near, how he looked at me without needing to be understood or validated. That kind of presence is rare. I spent a lot of time in my own head questioning what this bond meant. I thought about love, not the storybook kind, but the kind that shows up unexpectedly, the kind that grows quietly in the background while you're busy surviving. It didn't come wrapped in ideal circumstances. It came wrapped in complexity, in grief, in years of shared silence and healing. But it was real, and whether or not I acted on it, I couldn't pretend it wasn't there anymore. We finished the trip without another intense moment, but everything about it felt different. There were no confessions, no physical closeness beyond the normal. But emotionally, we had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. And yet I didn't feel guilt. I felt clarity. What we felt wasn't wrong, it just wasn't simple. That distinction mattered. When we returned home, life resumed its usual rhythm. He started spending more time out, taking on new activities, volunteering, meeting new people. I supported it fully. He needed that space, and so did I. I started therapy again, this time not for grief, but for understanding the parts of myself I'd ignored for too long. I didn't talk to anyone about what had happened. Some things weren't meant for public dissection. This wasn't a story about taboo. It was about human complexity. Weeks passed. We didn't see each other often, but when we did, it was gentle, warm. No tension. No confusion. Just two people who now understood something deeper about each other. One afternoon we found ourselves back at the beach again, purely by coincidence or maybe something else. We walked quietly just like before. No heavy words. No pressure. Just mutual respect. Before we parted, he said, "I still feel it. But I also understand the weight of it. I'll never force anything." I nodded. I didn't need to say anything else. That moment, in its honesty and restraint, was more intimate than any declaration could be. We parted ways with peace, not sadness. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe nothing changes. Maybe everything does. But I know one thing. What happened that day on the beach gave me a truth I didn't know I was ready for. Love doesn't always fit inside lines. Sometimes it simply exists, quiet, steady, unspoken. And sometimes, that's enough to change your whole understanding of what love really is.